Guys, and welcome back. Happy holidays and a very Merry Christmas. I know it's a few days early, guys, but hey, it's never too early to celebrate the holidays, is it? Or maybe it is. I don't know. Anyway, guys, welcome back to the pre-Christmas edition of the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. I am, of course, Ray Russell, your co-host for the evening or the morning, depending on when you're listening. And this week, guys, going to jump back into the tail end of Bob's time in the ICW. We're going to tell the rest of the story involving the Sugarhold Challenge and Mr. William Harding, how he got paid from one Angelo Poffo. We're also going to talk about Bob getting paid from the Poffo family. And with the time allotted, we're going to dive into the old Plan B video. You guys know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, stay tuned. You're in for a treat. But right now, to get into all of that and so much more, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back one more time. Here he is, the one and only Santa Claus himself, or is it the snow miser? I'm not sure. Maybe he's just a bit frosty. Hell, give him a few drinks and we can call him Rudolph. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back the one and only Mr. Bob Roop.
So, with what I'm giving out today, are we going to consider that a gift? Maybe be one of those ones that people open it up and say, I didn't want that one, I'm going to trade it.
Well,
but
gifts should always be free. They're not always free, but in this instance, our show is free.
Yeah, and happy holiday to everybody, anybody out there listening to us. Actually, out there, folks, your gift to us is your attention to our product. So I want to say thank you for that. You're all individually our little private Santa Clauses. So, well, happy holiday. I don't say too much about Christmas and New Year's. I just hope that people have a peaceful holiday and
absolutely,
a restful time where they get a few days off from work and be around the family a little bit. Sometimes that's not the most restful time when everybody's home, but hopefully it is. So anyway, happy holiday to everybody out there.
Yeah, I'm going to send a shout out to a few of our very loyal listeners out there. Of course, Benji and family. What's up, Antonio, guys? And Howard Baum. And let's see who. Oh, Carrie Silken. Just very happy holidays to everybody. Be safe, be smart. And most of all, once again, be safe, Howard. Use a ride share. But anyways, guys, Bob, last we left off, we were telling the story, do you remember, of Mr. William Harding and how he escaped your Sugarhold in Angelo Poffo's bright idea of the Sugarhold Challenge on the last episode. We covered that part, but Angelo didn't necessarily want to pay Mr. Harding the money, trying to cite the old time limit. He just escaped the time limit when he finally escaped the hold, and thus he shouldn't have been paid, but William had some other ideas.
Well, I'm recalling it. I think the referee, the guy that had the timer, the watch, he tried with about 5 seconds left when the guy got away. He tried to call time, but immediately about 3/4 of people in the audience screamed, no, it wasn't a minute, and I knew it wasn't either because he was telling me as the guy was getting close to getting loose. Let's say Jack was telling me 15 seconds, 12 seconds, 10. I knew that this guy got away before the time was up. And one way you can really go about and just kill your town and your own personal credibility is to try to cheat something like that. So, as distasteful as it was, unpleasant, it had a positive kind of a thing to it because at the same time, because I've been telling those guys, I've been telling Angelo and not Randy so much. I didn't talk personally to him, but I was just they would usually be together. If I was talking to Angelo, Randy was usually somewhere around, and vice versa. But I was told, I don't know, this really, I'll do it because I'm part of the promotion here, but, really it's a waste of time and it doesn't benefit us. I think last week we talked and I said I thought they did it because it added one event to the card. Like if you had 5 matches on a card, but you added this one thing, then it looked like you had 6 things going on. And really you did.
Special attraction.
Even though it was going on through like what was supposed to be a break or intermission, it was still something going on. So I'm sure that's why they were doing it, because I didn't get paid anymore for it. And also, this is something that the miser really would adore, was that the people who were going in the hold, you didn't have to pay them. And they were for like free talent.
Right.
That's something he really loved. Actually, he would have probably wanted to charge those people $50 just to sign up to try the challenge, but he couldn't go that far. But well, anyway, the guy got away, and I went back. I was disgusted. I went back to the dressing room. Angelo Poffo, I call him the Miser. That was his wrestling name then. He wore a mask he worked under a mask as a miser. The miser was pacing back and forth, and he looked like he had just gotten a phone call telling that his wife and children had all been killed, or his house had burned down, or something. He was, what are we going to do? He's walking back and forth. I mean, like he had heard the worst news in the world. He's asking Randy, what do we do? What do we do? What are we going to do? And Ronnie Garvin just said, hey, you got to pay him. And that's what I said. You got to pay him. Now we had our share of $1,000. We all had 10%. So Bobby and Bonnie and I were all going to pay $100 each.
Right.
A total of $300 was coming out of our money, which, we weren't getting paid that much anyway, but you had to, otherwise you're just you'll kill your talent if you don't honor that kind of pledge. So what happened was Angelo kept going out there and talking to the guy, even after the show was over. He didn't pay him. If he'd been smart, he could have done a really great PR, public relations move by going out there and paying the guy in cash.
In front of the crowd.
In front of the whole crowd. He probably couldn't force himself to do that. He couldn't have done, maybe with a gun stuck up his butt, he couldn't have done that, so, because he was just so frugal. I mean, he makes Scrooge look like a handout man. So
the fact that he dubbed himself the Miser as a way to put himself over just tells you how stingy he could be, how thrifty he could be financially. I mean, hey, I'm the Miser, and he has no, that's normally a rib you would put on somebody, right? But he goes along with it on his own, right? So
right. Well, he was proud of it because, he did save money, and he was always able to pay his bills, of course, and support his family. And
sure,
he could be proud. He was proud of the fact that he was a miser. He was proud of the fact that, he didn't spend a nickel he didn't have to. That to him, that was it was his lifestyle. And maybe the guy grew up poor, and during the Depression, there was my mother-in-law was a child during the Depression, and she had in her later years, she was tight as she could be because she remembered what it was like to have the banks fail, and where during the Depression, the banks across the country, a lot of them failed, and people who had maybe $100,000 in the bank they lost all their money. It wasn't until after the Depression that Franklin Roosevelt created the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance. It was the only way you could get people to put their money in the bank again was by ensuring that, offered insurance that their money would be protected by the government. If the bank failed, the government would pay them. So, because nobody wanted to put their money back in the bank after about half the banks failed during the Depression. So, anyway, I found out later, years and years later, we were up here by this time. We didn't come up here till 1994. So it was while we were up here, I come somehow, I don't know if he called me or if I might have been on, not Facebook, but there was another
AOL?
Probably AOL. Maybe I ran across him on AOL, but I ended up talking to him, and he told me the story about what happened at his end. And what happened was that Angelo, the miser, kept coming out there and talking to him and trying to get him to come down off paying him the full $1,000. He first offered him $100, and then the guy would refuse. William would refuse, and so Angelo was waiting for everybody to leave. That was part of his strategy. He was just going to screw the guy, but he had worked his way up to offering the guy $250. Well, there was a cop there that was part of security for the building, and he worked as a local police officer. He was kind of keeping an eye on this thing, and he saw what was happening. He saw Angelo keep going back and forth. I don't know. William didn't tell me if he had talked to the cop about what was going on or not, but he did tell me that the cop had said after seeing Angelo out there trying to browbeat the kid into taking less or taking, less than $1,000. The cop actually spoke to Angelo and told him, he said, you better, if you ever want to come back here, if you want to have us work for your wrestling promotion, you better make good on your promise. And so he had to. And then he was stuck after that. But he did everything in the world. And when he was walking back and forth in the dressing room, I mean, I'm telling you, he probably, I often said that I thought he would be willing to do an unnatural sex act with the guy rather than pay him $1,000 because he was just so tight. But that was like a love-hate situation. I hated the idea of having to, he paying the money to the guy, but I loved the idea of Angelo having to do it.
It was almost worth losing that 100, huh? Just
oh yeah, well,
the satisfaction.
Yeah, there was a lot of personal satisfaction in that. You know what? Those challenges kind of stopped after that day. I never
imagine that. Oh, people can escape it if you just do this enough times. I get it. Yeah.
Well, William had shoulders about 18 inches wide. He was real small. Now, I saw him 10 years ago. He came, I mentioned it last time, Barry Rosehead at the Fan Fest had him down there as part of the presentation. Of his, he had him there as like a guest host, like you could tell a story. And I got to talk to him. He'd gotten a lot bigger. He was like at least twice as big as he was when I was in the ring with him.
Right.
He had gotten big, but at the time he was very small. And he told me, at least what he told me on the phone, was that he had been doing martial arts. You had to do a lot of stretching. So he had become very, very supple. Like I say, he had a lot of raise. So even when I got his arms up above his head and had even his elbows crossed where they had crossed all the way past each other, I mean, it looked like anybody else. It looked like the arms would snap off at the shoulders. I wasn't really hurting him because he was supple, and he wasn't a big muscular guy. The big muscle guys, they were easy to get because, once you got those arms and you start pressing the arms together, there was no place for the arms to go. And what it did is it shut off all the blood in the neck. And so it was very easy to put him out. With him, even with me putting all my weight on his arms, basically what I was doing, I had him gripped as tight as I could, and he's wiggling to get out, and I'm trying to follow him around the ring to keep him from wiggling out. And we probably did 2 laps before I just couldn't hold him anymore. Mm-hmm. And the sugar hold, I didn't even have the sugar hold on him anymore. Yeah, so I'm looking back on it now. I'm glad it happened. I mean, first of all, I didn't have to do that. That stuff is always dangerous. There were very few times that I went out there against someone from outside where we weren't working, where you went out where we shoot, that I didn't get some kind of injury of some kind.
Right.
It might be as much as, I had my eyeball scratched one time by a fingernail. I got bit. I got kicked. I had guys, trying to poke at my eyes and all kinds, it was fair. You were fair game.
And it's not even just the intentional ones. It could be the accidental ones, a swing of an elbow right into the eye socket or something along those lines. So there's all sorts of issues that can take place, transpire out there when you're quote unquote shooting.
Right. Exactly. When I used to work out with, sometimes in college even, they would ask me to work out with football players on the college football team to help get them in better shape. Well, those guys didn't know how to react to a wrestling move. And when you shoot on a move called, it's a takedown when you're both on your feet, when you shoot it on a single or a double leg tackle, every wrestler is trained by the time they get to where they've been in wrestling a month. They're trained when you shoot in on them, you back up. You back and you try to get your legs away from the guys. I'm shooting in to try to grab the guy's legs. He tries to get the legs away where I can't get him and come down and bring his body on down his weight down on my head and shoulders and then maybe try to go around, get behind me and score a takedown himself. Football players didn't react that way. when you shoot on a leg, sometimes they actually move forward. They move their leg forward, and you think you're planning on the leg being as much as maybe a foot and a half from where it actually is, and you run your face into it. You run your face into the guy's knee.
Yeah.
And oh yeah, working out with non-trained wrestlers who didn't know how to react in the style of a wrestler was very dangerous. And I didn't do it. After a couple of those times, I just said, no, these guys, they don't mean it. They're not trying to hurt you, but they're not trained to react to the way that we normally expect. So, yeah, you're right, just by accident. And that one, I told a story a while back about chasing the one guy, a little old man in a suit, chasing him out of the building across the street. And I'm running behind him with just a pair of undertights, bare feet, screaming, calling him every name in the book. There's about 50 people lined up to buy tickets for the TV that day at the Sportatorium. I ran by them. Then I had to come walking back by them. And I had been calling the guy every name in the book. And I was supposed to be a baby face. I walked back in there, man, I was embarrassed. People look at me like I had people whose mouth, or a woman whose mouth was hanging open when I went by the first time. It was still hanging open when I came back.
The good old days.
Yeah. So, yeah.
William,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I've read some things and I've listened to some podcasts and things that William had done a while back. And, he does give a little credit to, he walked in with a little technique he wanted to use here. Now, obviously, you're locking him in there. You can only do so much in the sugar hold to attempt to escape, but he did escape. And you credit that to a lot of it being his skinny body, his narrow frame, and his flexibility. And he I don't know that he denies that, but he also adds to the fact he thinks he likes to think that he used some technique. And I have to say, squirming and moving around and trying to shift your body and kicking yourself free is technique to me. So I say it's somewhere in the middle, right? I think he could have just laid there and done nothing. That's not a good technique. Having that smaller frame, as you pointed out. And I have to agree with you. It's like when I have fun with my kids and I put them in little holds and things like that, you put them in those arm locks and stuff, and it's easy for them to just slide right out because they're much smaller than you are. And I'm not comparing William to a small child, but it's still a lot easier. And then, of course, the flexibility due to the martial arts and training, things of that nature, but also the ability to kind of, it's just like in wrestling, learning how to, if you're in type of judo, where you learn to throw people and things of that nature, kind of learn to use the opponent's body's weight against them or whatnot. So I'd say it's a little bit of both ends that, it was just the right place, the right time. And for you, the wrong guy. And for Angelo Poffo, the very wrong guy. And so I just absolutely. So I just have like a paragraph or so here. I wanted to read from a story from Harding's take on what happened from his side of things. And you talked about a local police officer being there. It wasn't just any cop that was there, Bob. It was actually, in fact, the local sheriff that was in attendance for the show. So
right.
I'm going to read an excerpt here from a post online in regards to this story. This is the way William told it. I guess he was escorted out of the ring by the arena manager and 2 local law enforcement officers working security that night at the building. They led him to a storage room, not a good place to go when you're in an old-timey wrestling show, by the way, guys, where he spoke to a local sheriff eventually by the name of Sam Harrod, or Hayrod, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, who asked for William's side of the story. Now, a little while later, as you said, Angelo Poffo would come in and make a couple of offers. How about $250? How about, okay, that didn't work. He walks away. He comes back. All right. How about $500? Let's settle on that. Nope, William wasn't having it. He escaped the hold and he wanted his $1,000 large. And so Poffo leaves the room again. And that's when I guess he has that conversation with the local sheriff, who says, basically, I'm assuming what you said, what you relayed to us, in the fact that if you guys want to come back here, I suggest maybe you pay this guy the full $1,000. And that at that point, that's when Poffo pays Harding a $1,000 check, which is online. The picture of Harding back in 1981 time holding that check. So it happened. It's there. There's picture proof, literally. And a picture is worth 1,000 words, or in this case, a picture is worth $1,000, Bob, at least to the dismay of one Angelo Poffo.
Wow. That check thing, I guess you can't just write a check and then not honor it. I mean, that it is against the law. Mm-hmm. But I'm just amazed that I know we'll get to my story about taking a check in a little while here. But what he says is what William Harding said is correct. I think that the physical condition that he had of being supple and all that, and agile and strong. I mean, he was strong and wiry from the martial arts. I think that's all true, and I think that he used that to use a technique that I don't know if he'd been taught or developed it or whatever. But I know that it was very, very hard. I mean, I was an Olympic wrestler. It was very, very hard to hold on to it. And I think the way he's telling it is the truth. I don't find any fault with him. I mean, my hats off to the guy to go in there in the first place when the guy has done it before you gets put out, and you can see he's out of it, he's unconscious. That'd be scary to put yourself into something where the odds are pretty good you're going to be knocked, made unconscious, made to lose consciousness, because that's not a very comfortable feeling. If you go out quick, would be one thing. Even then, it would be nasty, terrifying. You can't breathe. You feel like your head's going to explode. So for William to do that took a lot of guts. And he deserved it. He deserved to get the money.
Of course, it did take some prodding by the local authorities. Maybe you want to come back here again. You want to run here again. Maybe you pay this guy. Maybe if you don't want to spend a night in jail, this guy gets paid tonight. So, well, Kentucky is a southern state. You have the South. This guy had this thing against carpetbaggers ever since the Civil War, back in the middle of the 18th century or 19th century. So, 1850s. And so the wrestling, and the point I'm trying to make, William was a local boy, and the sheriff was a local guy. The Poffos, especially Angelo, imagine the way he came across those guys, Mr. Greedy, and just his greed and his nasty attitude just, hanging right up front. He didn't work real hard to try to hide the fact he was a jerk. He was very right up front with the fact that he was determined to be unpleasant. So, yeah, I'm sure the sheriff and any of the local people that could make sure that what was right got done. I'm glad that they were there to have it happen, because it's a fun story when you look back, whether you know Angelo or not. I mean, it's just a wrestling promoter. Take the name out of there. A wrestling promoter tried to screw a fan over. And again, like I said, Poffo fought the law, and the law won that day anyway. And so congratulations many years later to William Harding for his victory, escaping the Sugar Hold Challenge, but more so his victory in fighting Angelo Poffo for the $1,000. And he comes out the victor twice that night, I guess you could say.
Just one last comment from my side on that.
Yeah.
Well, I wrestled 5 guys, and I mentioned this in the past also, but I took on 5 guys one night in Tampa with the Sugar Hold Challenge, much earlier in my career, back when Eddie Graham was still convincing me I should do that, to protect the business and all that crap. If any one of those guys had gotten away, I would have been really embarrassed because of who the audience was and the circumstances and the fact that I was not a big star, but I was on television. I was a celebrity of sorts, and I was getting pushed too. So at least up and coming somebody, and I would have been embarrassed to have anyone get away. But I wasn't embarrassed up there. I mean, I was disgusted because I knew it was going to cost us money. And to me, it was an expose of the business in a way.
Sure.
Because I was a babyface. I couldn't even punch the crap out of the guy. I'm not saying I would have done that anyway. First of all, any heel that does that angle or that gimmick is an idiot, because if someone brought a blade in the ring with them and gaffed you, cut you halfway open, nobody get mad at him because you're a heel. Anyway, with William, again, my hat's off to him. He made his life a lot more interesting in about 45 seconds or 50 seconds of one wrestling show. He's been living on that for how many decades now? So
yeah, that's always a story you could tell your kids, your grandkids, or just somebody at the bar, on whatever weekend or something like that. I mean, well, let me tell you a story, guys. So that's a heck of a story to tell. This takes place in June of 1981, and within, say, the next 6 weeks, you're gone from the company. So it kind of worked out. Really, it's like, okay, I what else are you going to do after that, right? It's like, well, I know it just happened in a town in Kentucky, but at the end of the day, in Frankfurt, I believe it was. But
yeah, it's Frankfurt.
It's so funny because within a matter of, well, less than 2 months, you're gone from the company and you're off to work for the Cowboy. Business is picking up for Bob Roop, it would appear here, as you move on to the Mid-South wrestling territory. We spent 4 episodes dissecting your time there working for the Cowboy. And you kind of touched on it when we were getting into that story. And I don't think we really deep dived into exactly how it played out. But as you make the connection, as you are set to leave the territory here, the ICW, for the Mid-South down there in Louisiana, you are owed some money from the Poffo family, specifically Angelo, I'd have to imagine, because you guys, Ron Garvin, Bob Roop, Bob Orton, had put in some money towards some points in the business, I would have to imagine, is what that was going for. And now you're coming to collect what's owed to you before you leave town.
Right. Well, we had an arrangement once we started working for ICW. We had an arrangement that we could buy into the company. We would get paid $200 a week. All the rest of our payoff, say another, I don't know, it wasn't going to be much, but another $300 or $400 was going to go towards paying for our stock that we were purchasing. So yeah, living at $200 a week is impossible. When you're in the wrestling business, your gasoline alone might be that much. Yeah, it was hard times. It was, I was thinking about it, and especially now where I'm life is good and all kinds of positive things to look back on and forward to, for that matter. But at that time, I had 2 episodes, one out there with Shire and then one in Knoxville, where both times the plans I had, whether they were feasible, whether they were smart, stupid, ignorant, or whatever, both times those plans have been derailed by treachery from a wrestler, from one of my colleagues, not a promoter, one of the other wrestlers had stooged us off and had gone to the promoter and told what we were doing. That was very depressing. I was just thinking, it's kind of a bald statement to make, but basically, from the time that Knoxville failed until the rest of my career, I never felt like one of the boys again. I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't want to. I didn't want to be I was one of the boys in behavior and appearance, but in terms of feeling that way, I very seldom ever rode with anybody or took anybody with me. I would go on my own. I'm talking about 400, 500-mile trip. I had a little Nissan, and it got 40 miles a gallon, and I didn't mind driving by myself. I had all kinds of things to think about. And yeah, I kind of lost, and I remember going, even when I went out to work for Bill, I felt like not a failure, but I felt like, I don't know, inept. Like here, I'd made these plans and made these tries, and they fell through. And it's like I felt like I had egg all over my face because of trying to do things that involved other wrestlers. Not everybody. Ronnie and I were tight after, and Malenko and Bobby, and the guys that went with us, I was always tight with. But, again, in both cases when you're on the opposition, you're an opponent to the business, and none of the wrestlers will talk to you. They won't even say hello to you. Guys you started in the business and, maybe you've helped out and had their back in a fight or whatever, or gone into the ring and helped them when they were in trouble. And now here you are, they won't even speak to you. I never felt like one of the boys after that. When I got to Watts, I gravitated to JYD because he was a horse. He was bigger. I thought he was bigger than Dusty because at the time he was still fairly fresh in his stardom.
Right.
I had seen Dusty for a period of time by then. Mm-hmm. And so the dog was, completely new, completely different kind of attraction. Very similar in some ways, but the thing is, I liked him, and I liked Sylvester Ritter, Junkyard Dog, as a person. He was a good guy. He was a good man. he didn't forget the fact that I had helped him out just a little bitty bit. And he never forgot that. He probably made me 1,000 times. I paid him $25 one night. He made maybe 2,000 or 3,000 times that much. just working with him. And he bent over backwards to help me too. To do whatever he could to help me make money and whatever. And just a good guy. And I was friends with Jake the Snake. I mean, how could you not like Jake? And Ted DiBiase, Ted was a good guy. How can you not like Ted DiBiase? But I just never felt like a member of the club anymore because I didn't feel like I could trust people when it came time to stand up. Mm-hmm. And not that there was going to be any more standing up on my part. After two times, both times cost me a lot of money. Hurt pride in a sense. Oh, you talk about feeling like a failure. Not only do you not succeed in taking over promotion, you have to fold up your tent and creep out of town after a couple of months. That's pretty embarrassing. It's humiliating in a sense. Yeah, it was. Those were agonizing times in a lot of ways, but they were good too in a way, because if you don't ever get into a situation where you feel like, I don't want to say at the bottom, but where you really have faced some difficult times and some embarrassing, some humiliating moments. If you haven't, you can't really appreciate when you have things really, really good, where you're not having stuff like that. You can't appreciate even things, even minor things that happen to you. Your kids have good health, just things that some people take for granted. You can't appreciate those if you haven't been, down in the, let's put it this way, you can't appreciate them as much if you haven't been down in the doldrums. So in that sense, it was not a good experience, but it was valuable because, you talk about feeling low. The night I wrecked my car, no insurance. Oh man, all of a sudden I couldn't. It was wrecked. I couldn't drive it. So here the one thing I had was mobility. I was only a couple of years old. Had a car I could leave and drive anywhere across the country. All of a sudden, I don't even have that anymore.
Yeah, now you've lost your transportation. So now you're just kind of stranded.
Oh, man.
Wasn't no Uber back then either, guys. So
No. So, and this isn't a poor, pitiful me, because you and I are sitting here talking today, and
it's like I said, business is picking up. You're getting packed up and ready to leave the Poffos and everything that's been going on here for the last few years in Knoxville and now Lexington, and you're moving down a little further south into Louisiana, and you're getting ready for, like you said, a run with Ted DiBiase, with the Junkyard Dog. Lots of great talent down there. We've covered that in past episodes. But you don't leave the ICW without the money that's owed to you, and that's what I'm curious. Now, we know what William Harding did to get paid. He went and he got on the house mic, and he listened to the threats from Bob Orton, Daddy, and he still stayed, and he demanded his money, and it just happened to be the sheriff right there in the building, and somehow it all worked out for him. But I'm assuming you had to take a different approach when you had to come knocking on the door, literally knocking on the door of the Poffo family household in order to get paid. So my first question is, I don't need an exact figure. I don't know if you even recall the exact figure, but what kind of money are we talking about here that you were owed? And B, tell us the story. What did you do to get paid before you left town?
The amount in question was about $5,500.
Okay.
That's what I had. Now, I reflected that on again. We were told, okay, we're going to pay you $200 a week, and the rest of what you make is going to go towards your stock. But we didn't even, at least I didn't. Ronnie probably did, but Bobby and I did. And I was so, again, dispirited, I was low, that whatever we were getting paid, it wasn't like we got a tally, okay, you made $600 this week, you're going to get two of it, and four of it's going to go. We never got that. All we got was $200. So I had $5,500 coming. Maybe I had earned twice that or three times that. I don't know, but it was too stupid. And again, it had to be with kind of being low in spirit and self-respect and whatever, to where I was just kind of trying to recover and move on, because I was I'd had a heady career in terms of where I'd been and what I'd done, and now here I am working for. Randy went on, not to Savage went on to become a big star, but he was nobody at the time. Lanny was he didn't have anybody that was a major talent. Even Angelo was whatever he had been 15 years before. So, I mean, I think with the height of his popularity, he was a big drawing card at that time when I was with.
Yeah, this is before anybody in the Poffo territory really hit. Well, you could argue that you and Ron Garvin and Bob Orton had already, well, hell, the great Malenko who left the territory back in 1980, you guys had already been to the mountaintop compared to a lot of the guys that were working in ICW. Now, obviously, Randy Savage, the Macho Man, going to go on to have a stellar career. Crusher Broomfield will go on to have a pretty damn good career himself as the one-man gang, and Akeem. So we know there's some talent there in the ICW, but it takes them a while to break free and go do some other things. But as you're leaving, I just did while you were talking, I quickly looked up the inflation calculator online, and $5,500 in 1981 money would accumulate to $19,000 in today's money. So, wow, that's a lot of money to be owed on the way out. I too would be going and looking to get paid.
Well, I knew I was going to have to fight for it. I knew Angelo would do everything he could to screw me out of as much of it as he could. I can't give it all to you. I'll give you $1,000 and then I'll send it. And I knew
the check's in the mail.
Yeah, I'm not proud of it, but I'm pretty sure I tried to do a little bit of a con job, and it was true in a way. I hadn't paid taxes for 2 years because I hadn't made any money, and I hadn't made enough to pay taxes. So I came up with a story that I had a problem with the IRS. It was true, I did, but I didn't say the IRS didn't know that it was a problem yet. I was the one that knew it was a problem. So it wasn't actually a lie, but it was a misrepresentation. Let's put it that way. So if the IRS is giving me problems, I got to deal with it, right? I need the money. I want to cash out. Hemming and hawing and stalling and all these kind of things. And finally, I managed to pin them down to a day that I think I quit working for him completely. I was living in Knoxville. I drove up there to Lexington, and I asked Angelo to pay me in cash. And I asked him, I said, will you pay me in cash? And he said, yeah. I said, okay. So I drove up there, and he asked me to come to his house. I asked him what time I could come by. He said he'd be there around 5. Well, I drove by there around 4 o'clock, and the show that night was in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, which is several hundred miles away. And Randy's car was there at Miser's house. Okay. Randy lived right next door. So his car's there. Now, that doesn't mean he's there. But I thought usually he drove. So I'm thinking if he's there, the reason why is that when I go inside, he's going to be there with Angelo. And who knows who. Now, Landy's not going to do anything. But maybe Mrs. Poffo is going to be there with a rolling pin or something, a tar iron. I don't know. But I already had, now this is going to sound really weird, but you'd have to understand. These guys were seriously, Angelo was seriously dangerous about money. He would do anything. So I didn't know if I was going to have to fight for it or not.
Especially but that amount, I would imagine.
Yeah, but if I didn't, I knew if I didn't get paid, that somebody, and I was worried about going to jail. They have box cutters that are about 3 inches long, little small ones. A lot of times they're on a keychain, but they got a little triangular blade at the end of them. I've never used one, but I've had it several times. It's like having a knife on you, except you can't see it. If you've got it in your hand, you can have that little blade out and people can't see it. And now, again, I've never cut anybody with a knife or bottle opener or anything else, but I've been ready to if I had to. And again, defending myself, not going after somebody, but defending myself. And the other thing is I went to somewhere where I could buy a kid's baseball bat, one about 2.5 feet, not the big long one, but a small one.
Right.
Yeah, a little bit longer than a tire tool. Well, if you walk in with a tire tool, You know, why are you bringing a tire tool to me?
I got a flat, guys. Sorry about that.
Yeah, yeah. So when I went up to the door, I had the box cutter in my pocket, and I leaned the baseball bat against the wall right beside the front door. I leaned it against there. I wasn't going to walk in the house with it, but I put it in there because I was going to go in the house to see what I had waiting for me. If I had 3 or 4 guys waiting for me, you know, just standing there, I mean, waiting, not sitting in chairs, but standing there waiting, I was going to grab that bat and come back in. That's the very worst case scenario. Imagine being convinced enough of a guy so desperate to screw you out of a few bucks or any, especially that amount of money,
right?
That you have to work, you have to go and worry about protecting your health in order to get it. So,
and that's that's something I want to, even though you're basically telling it right here as you're telling the story, there are always the detractors out there that for some reason still listen to the shows, which we do appreciate, by the way, but they listen to for the negativity, so that they can go online and go, well, he said this and he said that, and oh wow, a big bad Bob Roop took weapons into somebody else's house. Let's be clear here. You didn't take those in there to intimidate someone necessarily. You took those in there for your own defense, saying that, hey, yes, just letting them know, I'm going to do whatever I got to do to get what I'm owed to me. But I'm also doing this because, I don't know what you guys are capable of doing. I'm walking into your house.
Well, think about this out there, knockers out there. I'm walking in their house. In their house, they have right in the kitchen alone. They've got how many butcher knives? They've got a fireplace. They've got andirons. They've got fire tools. They got those pokers, those long ones with the point at the end and the hook.
Sure.
They got all kinds of weapons in a person's house.
Yeah. I
wasn't going to go in there. I mean, if Randy's got one and if Angelo's got one and somebody else is there, have got some kind of weapon, if I've got nothing to protect myself, I'm going to just have to run for it. And I didn't want to do that. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So anyway, when I went there, Angelo didn't have cash. In fact, he hadn't written a check. He hadn't done either. So I said, well, you're going to pay me in cash. Well, I couldn't get that bank, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, and what that meant was I wanted to go back home. And by doing that, I would be done with these MFers for good. I wouldn't ever have to see them again. I'd be done with them. I wanted to be done with them so bad. I mean, it'd be like having leprosy, and all of a sudden you find out you're going to be cured of it, and the last day of it, you're sleeping. All of a sudden somebody's going to give it back to you. So yeah, I wanted so bad at Lexington. I mean, I had my own home. I had my girlfriend and my own place in Knoxville, and I wanted to go back home that night, but by Angelo writing me a check, and the bank was closed. That's why he had me come at 5. The bank was closed by that time. So I had to wait overnight. I went over and spent the night at Ronnie Garvin's apartment. But I was so pissed off that I had to stay over that night because Angelo, he told me he'd bring me cash, but of course he never planned to. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I got out of there. Nothing happened. I never saw Randy. But yeah, I don't know. Angelo wasn't making any plans to do anything violent or anything.
Right.
But my suspicions were worst case scenario. In sports, for example, I'll take a little aside. As an athlete, if you use visualization as part of a training technique, you visualize yourself doing things successfully and making them happy and having them happen. So you visualize yourself doing your first, the moves that you're going to make in a wrestling match or whatever. And so the same thing in visualizing a worst case scenario of what I might face when I get in that house. Now, if I got in there and Angelo had he was standing next to the mantle, he's got a pistol on the mantle. Well, my baseball bat and my little box cutter aren't much good, are they? So, but you don't know what you're going to face in there. Well, that didn't come to happen. That didn't come to pass. Nothing untoward went forward. Angelo wasn't going to go there. He didn't want to get his house torn up or whatever. So I had to wait. I went to the bank in the morning. I presented the check. They looked at it and they said, just a minute. And they went, and the person I was dealing with went back and showed it to the manager. And the manager took it, and the guy the teller who talked to me came back and said, it'll be a minute. And I said, well, the check is good, right? I mean, why is it going to take? Well, it's going to take a minute. Well, what happened was that Angelo had left instructions for them to call him when I showed up with the check. And they were doing TV at the local station there in Lexington where they were taping their TV.
Okay.
And you talk about luck, serendipity and luck and fate and the way things happen. What happened was that the only phone that Angelo, we didn't have cell phones yet. And the only phone that Angelo could talk on was in the break room at the TV station. And Ronnie Garvin was sitting in there in the break room. I don't know why. He said relaxing, having a Coke, whatever. And Angelo got on the phone, and Randy was with him. Angelo got the call, and Ronnie told me about this part. Angelo puts his hand over the speaker and says to Randy, he says, should we pay it? Should we pay it? And Ronnie heard that. I spent the night with Ronnie the night before, so he knew what I was doing. And Ronnie spoke up. See, this is the luck. If it had been anywhere else, they could have possibly screwed me. I would probably still be in prison for doing something horrible to one of them, or both of them. So Ronnie spoke up and says, hey, what are you telling us our stock's no good? Our stock is no good that we bought? And, of course, as soon as they did that, Ronnie wasn't leaving.
Right.
As soon as he did, Angelo, he was pissed. Ronnie said the look he got on his face, he's totally, and they had to pay me.
Yeah.
If they were going to keep Ronnie. But if he hadn't been there, I don't know what would have happened. But I wasn't going to leave town I was like William. I wasn't going to leave town with $100. I was going to leave town. I earned every dime of whatever I was going to get. I earned it several times over. I was going to get that one way or another. So, Ronnie being in there was very, very serendipity. And so I did get paid, and I left town, and that's the last. I don't know if I ever saw Randy again. I don't know if I ever saw Angelo again. But oh man, leaving Lexington that day, I still remember how I felt. It was like I was still upset about my station in life, having gone from being, I had a charmed beginning there in Florida. We've been through that all on past episodes where I was getting the push all the time and working with world champions and, working with Dory Funk Sr., Terry Funk, Jack Briscoe, world championship matches and that. And here I am, up in Lexington working with, some guys that, started in the business like 6 months ago. So, yeah, it was a real come down, but it was good. I mean, it was good in terms of an object lesson. But
even though there was a lot of things that have already happened in your career by this point, you've been in the business, 69 to 79, it's 12 years in the business. So there's lots of ups and downs throughout the way, but you still had to feel some way like a new man, a new lease on life, at least at this point. You got $5,500 in your pocket and you're leaving Lexington, Kentucky. No offense to Lexington, people out there in the city of Lexington. It's more so about the Poffos and working for the ICW. And, the stories are out there from some of the other talent that work there. They laugh it off today, and some of them were friends with Randy Savage to as much as friendship you could have. I know Randy was very paranoid about a lot of things, but you got paid. It took a little bit, and you're right. Again, serendipity. Ronnie Garvin just happened to be in that break room or whatever you want to call it there at the studios. And I love his approach. It wasn't, hey, you're not going to screw over my buddy Bob Roop, or you're not going to screw over one of the boys. You need to pay the guy. It was business savvy from Garvin, looking at it from his point of view. Wait a minute, I got stocks in this too. Are you telling me that they're worthless? And so now they have no option but to either tell Ronnie Garvin and, of course, Bob Orton at that point, bye-bye, we ripped you off, or, we got to pay Bob Roop, or we're going to have some really big trouble here, because Ron Garvin, much like in Knoxville, he was the man there in ICW on the babyface side.
Oh, yeah, Ronnie was, much higher profile and visibility. Randy Savage, Randy was a good talent, but he wasn't pushed yet. He got the big push at the time when he went with Vince, but no, Ronnie was by far the star player of our group. Mm-hmm. And I went from there to Watts for a year, and then with Ole for 3 years or 2.5. And while I was with Ole that first year, I don't remember exactly when it was. We could find out when Ronnie Garvin actually started wrestling for Ole. But Ole was looking for some talent. He needed a baby face. And so I thought about Ronnie, and I called him. I had his number. I called him. He's still working for the Poffos. And I told him, I said, we got a spot for you, main event spot. And so he gave us notice, and he had the same problem I had. Angelo owed him. Ronnie told me that he had about $30,000 coming. Angelo had docked his pay about 30. Well, Ronnie had been there a year and a half after I left. So that's another, 70 weeks, 75 weeks that Angelo's taking money from. That doesn't take long. It's $200 a week will make your 30,000 right there. He went to Angelo, and Angelo started giving him the poor mouthing. I don't have that. That $30,000. Where am I going to get my hands on that? I can't give you that much. I said, I can give you like $5,000, and then I'll send you money on a regular basis when it comes in. And Angelo could say that with a straight face, looking you right in the eye, and but Ronnie knew better, because Ronnie, we already talked about the brown paper bag. One of the things about the brown paper bag is a lot of times when that's around, that's because there's nothing like on white paper, like a contract or a lease or some kind of check or something that shows that money got, some action, some dealing was made legally that you could prove. Look, here's the check that got bounced. I got it right here, or whatever. And Ronnie knew he didn't have that. He wouldn't have any contracts or anything drawn up with the Poffos. So it was just word of mouth, understanding. We were supposed to be able to, your word was your bond. If you said you'd do something, you would do it. But Ronnie knew that Angelo wasn't going to pay him. And he never told me how it happened, but he told me we had a guy working for us named Gary Sabaugh. I'm not sure I'm saying that's right, but his wrestling name, he went by also as AKA the Italian Stallion.
Right.
And obviously he was Italian. Nice guy. You told me earlier that you knew more about his background after I left. I never saw him again after that, but you told me he had worked for different groups for a long time.
Crockett and Turner, and eventually even Vince, doing jobs for Vince. But yeah, preliminary stuff. But certainly he was there for a long period of time as the Italian Stallion and the NWA and whatnot. So he certainly got around and reputable. Certainly a nice hand to have on your card.
Yeah. Well, he was he was fun to be around because he was upbeat. He was fairly intelligent, good sense of humor. Like I say, upbeat, ready to smile, be positive, had a good attitude. And so, it was kind of fun to be around with him. He was one of the boys, definitely. He was a little more experienced, or at least came across like he was, than some of the other guys that were like brand new. Brian told me that he had told Gary, the Sabaugh, the Stallion, he had told him that about the trouble he was having with Angelo was getting paid. The Stallion says, well, when are you going to see him again? Ronnie said, I'm going back tomorrow. Gary said, well, let me go with you. And Ronnie said they went in, and Angelo asked what Sabaugh was doing there, and Gary said, well, I want to talk to you. And Ronnie said, Gary and the miser, Angelo went off in private in another room, and when they came out after 15 minutes or so, Angelo wrote him a check for $30,000. And, you always surmise what Gary said to him. Maybe he had some kind of, I don't know what he could have said to get Angelo to fork up the full amount, but it must have been something fairly devastating. We started out talking about poor William, the guy in Frankfurt, having a hard time getting his money. Imagine, 30 times that, having to pay Ronnie Garvin. Angelo would probably rather cut a toe off than give him $30,000. But somehow, whatever Gary said, and it'd be great to know if I ever run into him.
You got me curious. I'm wondering why he didn't use these ties, just alleged ties, maybe whatever he said. Why didn't he go to the Bookers and get himself a main event slot somewhere? But yeah, that's a peculiar name to walk into a room with Ronnie Garvin. And imagine that, Gary Sabaugh and Ronnie Garvin in a room together, and it's Sabaugh that you're kind of okay. Yeah. Well, now I'll listen. Okay, it's not Ronnie Garvin.
He's the hero. He's the guy that comes across as the deal maker. The power that be.
I'll tell you what, Ronnie got out of there when the getting was good, because right after he left, that was the nosedive. And of course, Poffo and Savage and whatnot, they're going to eventually go over and start working with Jerry Jarrett. So much later after that, and I'm not saying they didn't keep money in the bank, that Ronnie Garvin couldn't have been paid, but it probably would have been a lot harder to get that money to Ron Garvin, because, once they stopped running shows, it certainly was going to be a lot harder to try to milk the cow there, if you will. So Ronnie Garvin got out of there just in the nick of time, I believe, with that kind of cash anyway. So very cool story. Yeah, so it wasn't just you that needed to get paid, but Ronnie Garvin too. Hopefully Bob Orton found his money on the way out, because he followed you out of town.
I don't know if he did or not, because he ended up borrowing money from me to leave.
Oh, Bobby.
Yeah, I don't know if he taken draws against. I don't know how he lived on $200 a week, because I don't think his wife Elaine, I don't think she worked. They had a baby. They had Randy.
I was going to say, was that baby's name Randy?
Yeah, they had Randy. So I don't know how he could make it on $200 a week. So he might have been going to Angelo and asking for more money, so that when it came time to leave, he didn't have anything coming. Mm-hmm. But I don't know.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com, and to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron over at Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, Patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive watch-along series covering mini-past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia podcast network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/WrestlePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
I do want to go back while we're talking about. I want a story I wanted to tell that was very typical. When we do shows, some of the shows we did, we had to bring a ring. The building, whatever, didn't have a wrestling ring.
Sure.
Or a boxing, any kind of ring. No. So we had a ring. They had a ring. I mean, not we. They had a ring. I think they would use a I think they rented a truck. But what they would do, Angelo would get 6 to 8 to 10 of the preliminary guys that were going to be on the show, and he would pick them up with a truck. Half of them would be in the back. They would go to where the ring was. Yeah, they would go where the ring was, and they would load up the ring and put it in the truck. And, one or two of them could sit up front maybe, but the rest of them would be in the back of the truck. Now, you had all the boards and the steel poles.
Yeah.
But you did have a ring cover, and there's usually padding. So there would be something where maybe you could make like some kind of comfortable little something to lay on or sit on, but not for everybody. Not everybody was going to have. So you had to ride in the back, maybe sitting on a steel beam for 200 or 300 miles, however long it was. And then if they had to stay over, like sometimes you'd have two shows in the same area where you weren't going to go back to Lexington overnight and then,
right.
100, 200 miles back, and then you would stay over. And Angelo would go and book a room. He would find the cheapest motel he could find. He would book a single room, one bed, single bed. It might be a queen. It wouldn't be a big double. And he would back the truck up to the door. He would ask for a room away from the office. He would back the truck up to the front. All the guys would get out of the truck and go in their room. And Angelo slept under the sink. The hotel room, he slept under the sink.
Wow.
Everybody else, the other 6 to 8 to 10 guys, had to share, two of them could sleep on the mattress, two of them could sleep on the springs. But, the rest had to find, slept on the floor somewhere. And that was life on the road with Angelo Poffo. Guess what? You talk about, and those guys, oh boy, did they talk about it. You talk about misery. He wouldn't stop to let them use the bathroom. Just miserable.
I'd say that's above and beyond paying your dues, right? I mean, those guys certainly paid their dues to get.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. If you're these were guys that I think had been training. They had trained some of these guys and charged them to train them. And I don't know, maybe these guys might have been paying to go on this trip. Maybe they had to charge them if they wanted to work. They were going to have to pay him.
Right.
I don't know, but it was just.
I wouldn't put it past them. Certainly wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, the level of cheapness was just so stark. And I thought we talked last week about Rip Rogers riding down the road with Angelo Poffo, just the two of them. Rip doing something rather extraordinary, and I tried to figure out a way
that's a word.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, I thought I'd figure out a way that I could say that without coming across as being. I think people might have an idea what it was, but Rip had the most intimate sexual experience with himself as possible to have.
Riding shotgun.
Yes, well, riding shotgun. I even asked him. I said, "Well, Rip, you had to be in the back seat, right? You were laying down, and he thought you were asleep, and you just." He said, "No, I sit right there next to him." I said, He said he was so boring. He was so cheap. He wouldn't even talk to me. He said so. He didn't want to give him any words. So he said, "Yeah."
I decided to entertain myself.
Yeah, he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what did Angelo do?" And he said, "Well, he looked at me and said, oh," he's because like he couldn't believe it, but he didn't. I mean, I would have stopped the car to get out or thrown a guy out. I said, "Well, if you want to do that, you're going to have to ride in a truck," But oh man, you talk about and I always liked Rip. I always liked Rip. I always liked him anyway, but I really liked him for that story because how better to show someone what you think of him. You know why? Because Angelo made it clear. Rest in peace, Angelo, if you can. But Angelo made it clear that you had no value to him whatsoever other than putting a buck in his pocket. You personally, doesn't matter what you were, other than his family, didn't matter. He had no use for you unless you could put money in his pocket. And otherwise, you had no value to him at all of any kind. He was a human being, unless you could put money in his pocket. And to be made to feel that insignificant with someone who, especially the guy who owns the company, is the boss, is humiliating in a way. Well, Rip had a way of sharing that humiliation, and Rip was never put down by it. He always laughed, and he thought it was funny. He'd say stuff that you weren't supposed to say. He'd say, yeah, like miser over here, he would say something horrible about his being a miser, and they kind of laugh, and everybody laughed rather than because it was true, but he would be insulting the hell out of it.
He had that kind of, it takes a special kind of person. They have that knack to be able to say the truth, but at the same time, people can laugh it off without you getting insulted or upset at him. And Rip Rogers was that kind of guy. I get that. Yeah,
Terry Funk was like that too. I mean, they had like a crazy side to him that like a offbeat, out from left field type of personality they could trot out to say these outrageous things. And then they didn't say it and then be like accusatory and then put it on somebody. They say it like a joke and laugh. And so the person who was being pilloried or being exalted really had a choice of either laughing or getting mad. And the old hands, of course, aren't going to get mad. Even if they really were inside, they would never act like they were because that way they look like they were marks, like they didn't have a sense of humor. But Terry said some of the most horrible things about promoters right in front of Graham and Funk and his own father and two or three other promoters. And they all laughed. They talked about it being thieves.
Right.
But
we rip them off. All right, Terry, that was a good one. Yeah, that's right.
But for Rip, I thought that was a classic. That was a definite. Rip made his opinion of Angelo Poffo real clear.
Can't say that story shocks me based on all the other stories I've heard throughout the years. The ribs, if you want to call that a rib, but that I've never heard that version of a story prior. But certainly doesn't surprise me at the same, especially from someone like a Rip Rogers. If you guys have ever followed him on social media, he's always got a kind of a lighthearted take to certain things, except for when you expose the business. Rip's really old school in that department, but
he is a witty guy, yes. And he's got a good mind. He was educated. I think he graduated from college. I think he was a PE teacher at school or something. He had a real good sense of humor, and I want to tell another story about when I was working with the Poffos. I was in Knoxville, and I think I was still doing the injured thing. But I'd gotten where I could, I'd been out a couple of months. It was before I could go back to work. And so they ran a show over in Memphis. Now I'm in Knoxville. Memphis, I looked it up today. Memphis is 391 miles from Knoxville. So I had to drive over there by myself, which was okay, except I didn't have a car yet. My car had been wrecked, and I still didn't have one. So I borrowed a little Japanese car of some kind from Buddy Landell. I drove over there. I think it took 7.5 hours to get there. And I found the building, and I parked the car, went inside the building. I just stepped through the door, and Randy and Angelo came running up to me. Get out! Get out of here! I said, What are you talking about? I said, get out. They said they haven't seen it. The TV was delayed a week there. They hadn't seen the angle we did on TV where I wasn't crippled anymore. I was, I'd been, we'd done the Sting or whatever where it showed that I had been pretending to, I'd been wrestling under the hood.
And the tape hadn't been bicycled to that town yet.
Right. They were a week or two delay. So I was supposed to still be crippled. And, from the TV, they're screaming at me. I don't mean, and no apologies. No, how was your trip? Oh, it took you 7.5 hours to drive here? Well, too bad. Get back in a car and go somewhere. Just get out of here. Well, where is there to go? There's no place to go but back home. So I drove 7.5 hours.
Wow.
I was out of the car for about 10 minutes, and I drove 7.5 hours back, 800 miles. That's a typical day working with the Poffos. Not typical, but something that not to be out of the range of it's unbelievable, it seems. No apologies on their part. No, I'm sorry you had to drive. No, nothing. Just get out of here. Get out.
Never to be mentioned again, I'd have to imagine.
Oh, of course.
Wow. So I feel better that you've left the ICW territory at this point, Bob. Like in 2024, going into 25 now, I feel better that in 1981 you have been able to remove yourself from all of this. It's insane to go back and think about things like that, but that's that's what happens. Definitely the definition of an outlaw promotion, to say the least.
Right. Well, thank you, Ray. But you know what? In all fairness, the experience was terrible at the time, but it's a good frame of reference because that's the bottom. Those are the dregs of being in any kind of a situation where you have to work with people who are like that. I mean, you're forced to, in a sense. I wasn't forced to, but all of us at that time were, Ronnie and Bobby and I were convinced that we weren't going to be able to get a job anywhere else. So, ICW was it. We were marks just like everybody, all the boys.
It's kind of funny because the biggest parts of all of your careers is yet to come. Bob Orton's going to be the bodyguard of Roddy Piper in the rock and wrestling era, Cyndi Lauper and Mr. T and all that stuff. WrestleMania, Bob Orton's in the corner. He does the cast gimmick for over a year there in the WWF. And Ronnie Garvin's going to be the NWA world champion at one point, beating Ric Flair, working Starrcade in the cage. And Bob Roop, you go on, you work with Ole Anderson. You're an agent underneath Ole, not just in Georgia Championship Wrestling, but you come back later on and you're going to work in WCW for a year as I guess you would call it an agent as well. So you guys are all going to have your time in the bigger business, so to speak, moving forward.
Yeah, those guys both had their careers were Bobby and Ronnie because they were lifers. I wasn't a lifer in the business. But they both had their careers. I never reached the heights again that I had done with, say, that year in Florida and with Bill. Up there with Watts, I was wrestling in main events most of the time. And when I went with Ole, I'd lost, quite frankly, I'd lost my joy of the business. I wasn't motivated to stay in shape, to keep my weight down. I was drinking. I don't mean walking around stumble drunk, but I wouldn't drink during the day, but at night so I could sleep. That's at least the excuse I was giving myself. But I had discovered that I had PTSD all that time. All my life in the wrestling business had gone from being one in Technicolor to being in black and white, and it was a lot more sobering type thing. I didn't have any more really optimistic
aspirations
attitude.
Necessarily.
Aspirations,
just kind of going with the motions and
Well, that's why
But you can't really knock the fact that you go and you work on top for Bill Watts for over a year in 81 and 82. You leave there, you go and work for Ole for TBS, working for underneath. Well, Ted Turner didn't own the company, but he owned the channel that the main program was on. You guys were down there in Atlanta working the Omni, one of the most famous territories of all time, the Georgia Championship Wrestling territory. And of course, Ole, the promoter, he looked at you as somebody he could depend on. For somebody that, quote unquote, stole these territory, tried to steal these territories in the past, it's kind of funny that some of the most hard-nosed promoters of all time utilized you on top. Bill Watts used you in the ring on top. Ole used you in the backstage area on top, as well as he also utilized you in the ring at portions of your time there in Georgia. You were in the ring. So, and then, of course, Ole came calling again in 1990 when he took over the book and kind of started running WCW there for about a year. Before Dusty came back in 91, he calls you again and you're right back into the swing of things because he could depend on you. He knew at the very least that, you were going to do your job right. So we have that to go on, but I don't want to go too far off topic, Bob, because I did promise something last week. And if we don't get to at least try to start touching on it this week, I'm going to hear about it online. So I want to go back to the Plan B video. And, we've gotten questions about this going back to when we first announced we were doing a podcast over a year ago. When is he going to talk about Plan B? Well, here it is. It starts right now. And so for those of you who don't know what Plan B was, it's a video that came out a few years ago now, but it was taped back in, I guess it would have been 79, maybe the beginning of 80. I know All Star was still around, but you guys were kind of floundering. And so and correct me if I'm wrong at any point, because I'm going to let you tell the story, but I want to break it down to get going here. And basically you guys put together a video. You filmed this in a TV studio. Reportedly, maybe it was Ron Wright who contacted a program director by the name of Fred Phelan, I believe. But you guys recorded this after hours in a TV studio, and it's the Knoxville 5 proper, if you will. Bob Roop, the Great Malenko, Ron Wright, Ronnie Garvin, and Bob Orton. And you guys take turns going in front of the camera and basically breaking kayfabe. The Great Malenko, the video's out there. It's on YouTube. You guys can go check it out. Today, maybe, it sends chills down your spine today. You can actually, it takes you back into that time when you watch it. At least it does for me. But of course, everybody knows that wrestling's a work now, sports entertainment, pal, and all that good stuff. But back in this era, to see the Great Malenko step in front of the camera and say, "This is my fake voice. This is my real voice. And my name is Larry Simon." That's kind of crazy, to talk about. As you watch the video, Ron Wright talking about all of my matches were make-believe, and I never had a legit match. They were all pre-planned, and I did something that it was called getting heat, and one night I got too much heat. I made the fans too angry, and so they gave me these 191 stitches down my back. Ronnie Garvin admitting that all of his fights were not real. In fact, the guys that he hates the most in the ring are actually his best friends. He calls it a work. He explains what the term work is. And of course, Randy Orton going to follow everybody up and continue to tell the story that I was an amateur, but as a pro, I never had one legit match. And you're
talking about Bob Orton.
Yes, I'm sorry, Bob Orton. And
there you go.
And then at the beginning and end, you introduce everything as to what we're about to hear from these guys, and then you close it up by essentially making threats as to there's going to be more of these videos coming, guys. Talking about the big business and how wrestling is ran, and you guys as wrestlers were conditioned to protect it, even though it's as you called it, a fraud. Technically it is, right? We're pretending that it's real. But you said this episode or this Plan B video was just an outline for a planned mini-series. So I guess there's a lot of questions in people's minds. I think some of them have been answered since that time, since this video came out a few years back. But I got to ask you, I've heard it called basically essentially a bluff. You guys were never going to expose the business. This was more so to scare some of the promoters into giving you guys work again. So do you remember what the exact intentions were to create this video and who the video was created for?
Yeah, I do. I know that, we were less than nothing really in terms of having made an impact. We were, as soon as we rose up and made our move, and once we were found out and didn't have TV, we were easy to squash. But that's what they did, is that all the promotions around us contributed to putting us down, sending in people boys to work against our shows. They would try to have shows the same night, or as close as possible. They would have guys from all the different territories would come in and have these super cards, or at least, and they could keep doing that. So it was kind of a way of, I don't know, thumbing our nose. Those about, you know what? Now that I think about it, it was really the only way we could hurt them. And even then, I don't know how hurtful that was going to be. It might have meant something if it got on 60 Minutes or something like that. But to be on a wrestling show, I don't know. Well, what wrestling show would put it on? It was a way to do something. We had done nothing to fight back. We couldn't. There was no way. We couldn't beat them in the shows. We couldn't even advertise our shows on television. So we couldn't compete there. This was like being a spoiler. If you can't compete, if we can't have it, then nobody can have it. It's that kind of spoiler type technique. But the hopes of having some kind of bargaining power, of being able to talk to people about it. The thing is, once we did it, it just kind of dropped. I don't remember ever even thinking about it or wondering about it again. We never had a plan when we made the thing about what we were going to do with it, and I don't remember exactly. I made a reference to it in a past episode or two, but personally, during this time, I didn't have my act together very well. I was frustrated as I could be about, the way things had transpired. I don't know what I expected. I thought about it a lot. Going back to our original meeting where we decided to go opposition, where Ronnie said, "Let's take it." I looked at him, but also looked at Malenko. And when Malenko was okay, when he said okay, here's a guy that's been in the business, 30 years. I've been in 10. And he's saying okay. And Ronnie, is this guy that's the world of experience. And he's saying, yeah. So I'm thinking, well, if these guys think that we can do it and make it, then I guess I do too. The thing is, they didn't have any more clue. I had more of a clue about what to expect by far than they did by what had happened to me in California. And I should have probably told them that. But, you look back now, I wouldn't change a thing now, or because you and I wouldn't be talking if we changed that. But it was a way to try to, okay, we've done something. We've got some kind of power in the situation instead of just being these losers out here who got nothing. We can't promote. We can't draw any money. We can't do TV. We can't be seen. We're basically invisible. This is a way to make ourselves relevant, and that's what you call a last ditch effort too, because you're talking about exposing, and you're right. At that time, it was that was just the holy grail. Do whatever you want. You can walk around with no clothes on, but don't expose the business. You can expose yourself, but don't expose the wrestling business. As far as, and I never knew what happened to it. When it came out whenever it was, a few years ago, I was surprised. I was surprised it came out, but I did wonder what had happened to it. I figured Ron Wright had it because he was the one that set up the...
Yeah, he had the original copy, and I guess he gave a few copies out, and somebody gave their copy to somebody else, and that person posted it on some sort of a... They attempted to run some type of a streaming service with, random wrestling videos online, and somebody downloaded it from there and uploaded it to YouTube, and the rest is history. So it did start with Ron Wright. You're right. And it sat dormant for a few decades there, right? Until somebody decided, hey, I might be able to make a couple bucks off this. Unfortunately for them, joke was on them. One of the people that they made a couple bucks off of posted it for free for everyone else to see. And so that's how we got it public domain, basically. And so everybody's able to see it. So basically was this a bluff, or were you guys fully heavily invested in, if you needed to, taking this video and giving it out to the public, to the news? Or was this just a way to kind of keep the promoters in line and maybe, I guess, blackmail them into giving you guys jobs, giving you guys some work?
Those are all considerations. Back to my part again for a second.
Yeah.
I was a booker for Fuller's territory. Once we weren't working for them anymore, I wasn't the booker for our group because we had the three of us, And I wasn't. Some people, for some reason, Fuller seemed to think I was the captain in charge of the team. Not at all. Not with Ronnie and Malenko. I'm an old school guy. I believe in seniority. These guys had way short, especially Malenko, seniority on me. So I was looking to them because there's no substitute for experience. And these guys had experience that I didn't have. So I was looking to them for leadership. I wasn't the one that was calling the shots, not by a long way. Not that I wasn't, I was sitting twiddling my thumbs, but, I was looking for leadership from the group. It wasn't me leading things, let's put it that way. In fact, it never was. Yeah, I was the face of it because I was a booker, but without Ronnie and Malenko working so hard to not just draw money, but to go out and have these great matches, and to put their own thinking and their own experience into it, I wouldn't have had the clout I had as a booker. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I'm not a leader. With that group, think about it: Malenko and Garvin and me. I'm not the senior. I don't have any seniority with that group at all. And I said in the past when we did booking together, those guys would come up with a majority of the ideas, and I would add what I could. But a lot of times my job was I tried out a lousy idea or two. They would take it and clean it up. Yeah, so, those were, man, you talk about, there's nothing like being booked as a wrestler where you are guaranteed, not just guaranteed, you're expected to show up and work every time you're booked. So you're as attached and as hooked up to your employment as you possibly can be, to where you go out position, you have no attachments at all. You got to go out and make your own connections and attachments. So you really go, it's a completely different environment. And we were, none of us were used to it. None of us had a private fortune that we could draw on. Well, in retrospect, we made a bad mistake doing it. Again, I'm not sorry about it because I wouldn't be here. But it was a bad move on our part. Once we were found out, we should have just dropped it.
Well, I think a lot of people have always wondered that. I don't know that we've ever actually answered your thoughts on that, but that's very cool to hear that, hey, we realized that was a mistake and maybe we shouldn't have done that. And, if we could change it, we would. Obviously, not without altering the rest of your life that followed, but in that specific instance, that's something that if I had to take it back, maybe that we would have done things a little differently. On the topic of filming that Plan B video, of course, Plan A was to make All-Star successful. And when that was faltering, you guys went to creating this video. Now, I've heard stories that, and if you don't recall, that's totally fine too, but supposedly this video that aired was just, as you said in this video, an outline of a mini series to come where you were going to talk about where the blood comes from, obviously blading, physical manipulations, money and payments made versus money being reported, specifically to the feds and whatnot, the IRS, monopoly of the NWA, homosexuality and professional wrestling. So these were things you were threatening to expose in future videos. Yep. I've heard stories, and I don't know how accurate they are, that you guys began filming some of these other videos. None of these ever came to light. Supposedly, Ron Wright threw all of the originals in the fire, so to speak, outside of maybe this Plan B video. So do you recall filming further videos, or was this it to the best of your recollection?
This is it, the best.
Okay.
But we were talking about the homosexuality thing. We were looking at
Jim Barnett, I would imagine.
Jim Barnett, yeah.
Right.
He was against us in Atlanta. So we were looking, and then you have to see another thing with the kayfabe was think about who was the godfather of the kayfabe in the business at that time was Eddie Graham. So here, in Florida, he was the one that was just so dogmatic about it.
Right.
So that was one way to get him. The homosexuality part was a way to get to Jim Barnett. And who knows if we had pursued that and gone and looked for, a buyer, like again, the 60 Minutes or some kind of, human interest story, whatever, try to sell it, we might have been able to do something. But in retrospect, again, I've seen a couple of the videos of guys that did exposés. I can't think of one guy's name. He was a blonde.
Eddie Mansfield?
Yeah, Eddie. I knew Eddie. I didn't know him very well. We went to Puerto Rico one weekend together. I spent a couple of days with him, but I got to know him a little bit. But when I watched his expose, it was flat. I mean, it was just kind of tawdry, that like, okay, most people know what you're telling, what you're saying is like, if you go to a person and you say, okay, we've got a gun to your son's head here. If you give us the wrong answer, we're going to pull the trigger. Is wrestling real or is it not real? And most, anybody, but I think that like 99.99% are going to say it's not real. Movies, we go to see horror movies. You have to suspend your disbelief. It's not real, but you get involved in it. It's the same thing with wrestling, where people suspend their disbelief. I don't know if I don't remember any effort at all to improve on that plan B and go to a plan C or D. And you know why? Because we were like guys in a lifeboat out in the middle of the ocean that had to go wherever the weather or the current was pushing us, because we didn't have an idea about what to do. We didn't think about going and trying to find a sponsor to inject some money into it. We were all flailing around, and Ronnie and Malenko had no experience at all at doing this kind of thing, going opposition. I had some, but it was nothing of any moment, of any importance. Once Shire found out and fired me, it was over. That's a pretty easy way to end that little problem.
And people forget that Shire left you left you on the roster there for a few weeks thereafter as well. Well, you tried to screw me, Bob, but I need you to go out there and perform. So just keep wrestling for a couple more weeks, and
yeah, he could make. You want to know what he was doing? What he wanted to do? He wanted me to work a couple weeks because he wanted to steal my payoff.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah, he wanted me to work a couple more weeks because he paid 2 weeks ahead. So I was going to work 2 weeks for free. That was his plan. That was his way of getting revenge. Was screw him. I was making about $1,200 a week. That was his plan, was to steal a couple grand from me. So what I did was I got draws. Terry Garvin was his show running. He was his guy who ran the show. Took care of the shows. And what I was doing is I was getting draws from. A draw is you go and ask for money, get cash,
advance. Right?
And in advance of your payoff. And I was getting $200 or $300. Well, not $200 or $300. I was getting what I would normally make, like on a show. I would say, okay, I'd normally make about $200. I'd ask Terry for $180 or whatever. Yeah, that's why the story we told about why Shire went to the commission and got my license suspended, was he said I stole money from him. Well, he was trying to steal money from me, and what I did is I knew what he was going to do.
Right.
So I got the money. I got my payoffs in advance, and that's what he was so pissed off about. So yeah,
we've finally moved out of the 70s. We've went through Florida and Amarillo and Lexington and Knoxville and pretty much everywhere in between, Australia, Japan a few times, Iraq, lots of places. And now we're, back in the 80s. We talked about your time in Mid-South, which is where you're headed as you leave the ICW here in July of 1981. And you're going to go work for the Cowboy for quite a while, well into 1982. And from there, you'll eventually pop up working with Ole Anderson in Georgia Championship Wrestling. And I don't know that that's going to be our next episode. I'm going to go do some digging and figuring out what we can do for the next episode. But I do know I've had a lot of people ask, when's the next Ask Bob Anything, another Q&A episode? People want to send in their questions, and I've been waiting patiently for that. So we're going to try to work one of those into very soon, Bob.
Good. That's a good idea. That'd be a way, that would be a way of both for you and me, someone to bring up something in their experience that you and I don't have in our repertoire, and that I would remember, or maybe you aren't aware of some new stuff, like new material. That'd be great. I'm ready for that anytime.
Yeah, anytime somebody remembers an angle that we haven't discussed here, or a wrestler, a talent, a story that may have heard secondhand somewhere else, any questions you might have, or just really anything in particular, send it our way. You guys can do so. Make sure you can find me on social media, and you can send them, DM me there, facebook.com/wrestling grenade, over on Twitter, or as they call it now, X. You can DM me there at Wrestling Grenade as well. And you guys can hit me up on email, wrestlecopia@gmail.com. And I can put together the questions, send them Bob's way, and we can kind of sort through and make sure he has answers for them. And the ones he doesn't, we'll address those as well, just so people don't feel left out, Bob. But I certainly want to, get that thing going, and we'll try to do one of those very early here in 2025. And that's going to be a fun time. We had a good time last time, but yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing all the new questions that may come out from all the stories you've told over the last year since the last time we did a Q&A, which was early part of 2024. So it's about that time again, guys. So yeah, we'll definitely put one of those together very shortly.
Well, you know what might be good, Ray, is some of the naysayers or the people who have a problem with me and my behavior, whatever, please air your grievance, whatever it might be. Just detail it. Make sure that we know exactly what it is that you're upset with, and ask, and I'll be glad to answer it to the best of my ability. I mean,
unfortunately, those people, the answer might never be good enough. So,
Well, all I can do, what? Here's the thing, though. Maybe it's not good enough for them, but it might be good enough for people who are willing to have a fair mind about things.
Good call.
Because there's two sides to every story. Nobody heard my side of the story with Ron Fuller for 30-some years until recently. So, and apparently there's, some new opinions, or at least enhanced opinions that are more full than just when my side was missing. It's hard to have a complete opinion about something. But no, I want to hear. I'll be glad to ask questions about anything. But the people that are bothered, that have a problem, you know what? Maybe I can help you. Maybe I can clear up something for you, or maybe I can confirm what you think I'm a serious jerk. Maybe I can confirm it for you. Yeah, I'm a serious jerk. If I did something that and I do, believe me, I did plenty of things that weren't, commendable and things I'm really proud of. Sometimes it's just part of the business that you're in. You have to do things that are, sometimes that are, you wish you didn't have to, but it's the nature of the beast. But please, anything, not personal, but anything in wrestling, anything that bothers you, please write us and let us know, and I'll try to answer the questions.
All right. Well, there you have it, guys. Ask Bob Anything, number 2, going to be coming fairly soon. I don't want to say how far away, but not too far off. The quicker the questions come in, the quicker we can get one going, though. So keep that in mind, guys. Send them our way, and I'll send them to Bob, and we'll work it, get it all situated, and we'll get it ready to go here in the not too distant future. But for right now, guys, time to wrap things up, Bob. I want to wish everyone happy holidays. Be safe out there. Enjoy the family and just enjoy the free time. Like Bob said, if you guys got a couple days off, enjoy those. Relax while you can before it's back to work and the hustle and the bustle of the real world. So for that, with that said, though, Bob, I am going to be jumping off here. We got some things going on here around the household, but I want to thank you so much for taking the time once again to do another show here. Lots out of the way. We finished the story of the Sugarhold Challenge, Mr. William Harding getting paid. We told the story of Bob Roop getting paid by the Poffos on the way out of town, headed down to the Mid-South Territory. And we even heard the Rip Rogers story, which I didn't know was going to make the light of day here on the program, but very, very tastefully told, if you can tell it tastefully. I don't want to know anything about that taste. Anywho, and then, of course, we finish out with the Plan B. You guys have been waiting very long for the story to come out here on the show. We finally got to it here. Hopefully, if you didn't like the answers Bob gave, at the very least, at least you know Bob's side of the Plan B video now. As we wrap things up, Bob, I want to thank you once again for everything that you've brought to the table here on the Wrestling Stoop as we head into the new year.
Well, thank you, Ray. And I want to wish you and all our listeners, we're all in this together. And so I want to wish everybody a very peaceful holiday and safe, like you said. And I'm looking forward to going down the road and starting some new stories.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap things up here this week. But in the meantime and in between time, I encourage everybody to go out there and friend Mr. Bob Roop over at facebook.com/PoorBobRoop. And you can find me, Ray Russell. Follow me on X at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade also. Follow and like me, facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. But most of all, I encourage everybody to go over to patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia. So many great gifts there, including early show releases, digital downloads, video casts now available, and so much more. Check it out over at Patreon. Help support the brand. And until next time, on behalf of Bob, we ask you guys to hold tight and see where we head next time. Right here on the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop.